This is Musical Talk.
Musical Talk.
The UK's independent musical theatre podcast.
Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Well, hello, welcome to this week's episode of Musical Talk. I am here with my friend Robert Gordon. Hello, Robert.
Hello.
We are sharing tea and coffee with Sir Tim Rice, making his second appearance on the third appearance on the podcast, really. And he's going to talk to us today about From Here to Eternity, which is your new musical, which is going to be playing at the Shaftesbury Theatre in September.
This is right. Well done.
That's my job done, so...
Yes.
Well, Tim, I wonder if I could start by asking, I find it very interesting, the whole idea of the project, because I think it's a great film, the From Here to Eternity, a kind of iconic film with a number of iconic performers in it. But also, I think the novel, which I believe is rather different. I've just started reading the novel, actually, and find it quite fascinating, a much better novel than I assumed it would be. And I wonder if you could say a little bit about how it came about. How did you? I know that Stuart Brayson had initially worked on the idea and brought it to you. And if you could tell us a little bit about that and who the team is and how you've worked together with the rest of the team.
Well, it's Stuart's idea, and it's important to stress that we are basing our show on the book, not on the movie. It was a very good movie. It came out 60 years ago.
Iconic cast as well.
Yeah, great cast. Very, very dramatic, won lots of Oscars. But because it was 1953, it couldn't really be quite as brutal or upfront or daring as the book. And the book, which I hadn't read when Stuart first came up with the idea, the book is, without doubt, one of the greatest books of the 20th century, one of the greatest American novels of the 20th century. And when you read the book, you realise that, and this isn't a criticism of the film, you realise that the film didn't really cover an awful lot of the book in some respects. Although it's going to be true to say that we can't do that either in 2.5 hours with a musical. But I think we can get into some areas which the film was unable to do so. And we found an awful lot of things in this brilliant book that I didn't know were there. No, and I was just going to say very quickly in answer to your original question, because I've been rabbiting on, was that Stuart Brayson, who I've known for a long time, as a very fine writer. I first met him in the 80s when he was writing pop songs. And he had a career as a leader of a pop band, which did okay, nothing sensational, but I knew he was good. When he began writing musicals, and one or two of them he got on, up north where he comes from. He lives near Blackpool. And we kept in touch, and then many years ago now, some 10 or 12 years ago, when he sent me an outline of songs and ideas for a musical based on From Here to Eternity, I thought this was a very strong idea, and I wanted to help him achieve it, get it onto the West End stage. And in the end, it seemed I was only able to do that if I came in as a creator as well as a producer.
What I find very exciting about it is it's as you say, it's a very important novel, and therefore, I mean, one would assume that it would absolutely have to be very much a book musical, a traditional book musical. It's not in any way a pop musical, I imagine.
No, you're right. You're right.
And it seems to me that it's great that you are involved in something with such dramatic weight, because I always think of you particularly as someone who's very, very formative in putting forward the idea for something like Evita, which is also, in many ways, a drama based on reality, but also Chess, which I think has a very strong dramatic content. So it's great that you're involved in something which I think has a strong book. But of course, it's not totally, I wouldn't say fashionable is the wrong word, but I mean, the fashion at the moment often tends to be very much for compilation musicals, jukebox musicals, and this seems to me to be really a good move on your part, I'd say, to push the traditional book musical in Britain particularly.
Well, I'm hoping that's the case. It will have a book. It has got a book. It's got a very good script written by Bill Oakes, who's a fine writer I've known for a long time, and he's got a background in musical theatre and film, working with Robert Stigwood. He was producer of the music for films like Saturday Night Fever and Grease, and he's written some television plays. This is the first time he's actually written a book for a major West End musical. And what I like about working with people like Bill and Stuart is that it is their first time in this particular region, as it is for the director, Tamara Harvey, who is a wonderful director, but this is her first big musical. And it's very exciting for me as an old codger to work with three very talented people who I have 100% faith in, who are all kind of new to it. They've all got a huge experience in other areas, but it's very exciting for me to come together with them and get their enthusiasm and hunger, which sometimes I find hard to raise. Not now, because these guys have helped me raise it. But I doubt if I would have wanted to do any other show with the same old crew I'd been working with, or any combination of that crew. I don't know. It all depends. It all comes back to the subject matter, and this is a very strong story. And you're right. It will be difficult to tell this story totally operatically without a book. Not impossible. And Stuart and I did discuss that possibility back in the early days, but in the end we thought there's so much there, and we really can get an awful lot more out of it dramatically than just with songs. It's great to have a great book as well, which Bill has provided.
And Stuart originally did the book, music and lyrics for his concept, didn't he?
Well, there was never really a book as such.
But I remember reading he did the lyrics.
Yes, he did the lyrics, and they were very good.
Did you?
Well, what happened, I mean, roughly to simplify the story, when Stuart sent me a CD of his ideas for a musical based on From Here to Eternity, the first thing I said to him, oh, great, this could be good, because it's a good story, and the story is key to everything. I said, have you got the rights? And he said, rights? And I said, oh. I said, well, we better get the rights. And we don't want the rights to the movie, we want the rights to the book, because the movie probably couldn't give us the rights to the movie, because they in turn got the rights from James Jones, the author's estate. Anyway, to cut a very long story short in this aspect, I eventually did get the rights. I got them from the James Jones estate in Los Angeles. It took me a couple of years, partly because it wasn't, to be brutally honest, it wasn't my number one priority at that time. I just said to Stuart, look, I'll see if I can get the rights. And in the meantime, I recorded some of the songs for demos with West End singers to get them away just from Stuart's voice, which is a very good voice, but I wanted to see how it would sound with ladies singing.
You know how that goes.
And I made some demos, and then I took the recordings round to various producers, and we did a couple of little workshops, but nobody was that interested until I came across Lee Menzies, who is a very distinguished producer, but he was the first one who said, well, there might be something here. And he said, well, we've got to get the book, we've got to get a director, we've got to get everything worked out, so it's more than just a collection of nice songs. And at this point, it was still Stuart's lyrics. And anyway, when Bill and Tamara came on board, they restructured it with help from me and Stuart. We reconstructed the plot, the structure of the whole story. And of course, this meant that a lot of Stuart's songs, as they were, didn't really fit, because there were new scenes, there were scenes which needed to be radically rethought.
But you can keep tunes, which is also...
We could certainly keep the tunes. And everybody said to me, including Stuart, well, why don't you write, one or two of the lyrics for the new songs? And I said, well, all right. And originally it was going to be additional lyrics by me. We're talking 4 or 5 years ago. Anyway, I did write about 3 or 4 brand new songs with Stuart, and I also rewrote 1 or 2 of the ones that didn't fit. And then everybody said, well, why don't you do all the lyrics, change them all, because some of the lyrics that Stuart had written, which were very good, weren't quite in the same theatrical guise that mine were. And it seemed to make more sense and give the thing better continuity, a better feel, a better, whatever the word is, sort of one
milieu.
Milieu, maybe. I'm not sure what the word is.
Did it remind you in a
Let's
way?
not waste too much time wondering what the word is.
Did it remind you? Did it remind you in a way of what you did with Anna Menken when you
Yes.
sort of asked to?
Well, of course, the problem
take over someone's voice. In a
yes, in a way, except I was kind of, in this case, cruelly booting out Stuart's lyrical voice to a certain extent. Whereas with the late great Howard Ashman, obviously some of his stuff was so theatrically brilliant that one just had to try and fill in the gaps and match it. Anyway, I failed to cut a long story short, but it ended up with the lyrics being, in effect, about 90% mine. There's a few titles of Stuart's I've kept, and the odd line here and there, but it's true to say that in terms of what we each contributed, that it's now in effect lyrics by me, music by Stuart. But
it's collaborative, isn't it?
Yeah.
What I find very interesting about your own career is that it seems to me that when you started, you were very much the initiator of the book idea, and the lyrics drove the book, especially in those more operatically structured pieces. Right up to Evita,
yes,
at least up to Evita, and so that was a different kind of work, and that was a different kind of project for you, where the dramaturgical idea was very much yours, and now you're having to work in the old sort of traditional American way of actually there's the book, there's the music, there's the lyrics, and you're having to find voices for the characters in a different kind of way and fit it to the dramatic context. And the way you've described it very clearly, that when you change the approach to the book, obviously all the lyrics the songs will change. I wonder if have you found that an interesting challenge, or is it different from the way in which you've often worked in the past?
I suppose it is different. When you go down to writing an actual song or a scene, it's the same old story. Can I find a rhyme? Can I say something in a way that hasn't been said too often before?
Wordplay and things.
Yeah, that hasn't changed. But you're right. It's a different approach, and actually, it's for me a very refreshing one. And it's good to work, as I said before, with a young team, a new team, and giving me a fresh approach to the way I write. It's not it's very unlike some of the shows I've done, like Lion King or Joseph, which are aimed at children, but they're sort of fun, light-hearted shows, which I love doing, and maybe one day I'll do another one. But this is very much a grown-up show, and it's got a book. It's complex, it's adult. These are all things which, on the face of it, don't make it incredibly commercial.
And you're famous, I think, as a lyricist for your wit and jokiness.
Really?
You are.
Where did that come from?
next to Noel Coward, I would say. But
I've heard of him.
But I think people know you for the irony and for the jokiness of stuff like Joseph, and for the Lion. There's a certain amount of wit and jokiness in those shows. And this I imagine would be very different, because you can't always find jokes in the material.
No, I hope there's some humorous moments. I think it's possible to have
comic relief.
Yes, I always think of one of my favourite, greatest lyrics of all time is G Officer Krupke, and that is a brilliant lyric, which is very dramatic but very funny, and works very well within a pretty serious story. And
whilst commenting on the social,
while making a very good point, both in the plot and in the whole society that the story was told in. And I'm hopeful that one or two of the songs in From Here to Eternity will not for a moment say they'll be as good as G Officer Krupke, but I hope that they'll have a bit of that, the GIs saying, what are we doing here? Why are we here? We're here for 30 years. Are we mad? There's a lot of possibility there, which we've already been working on, and I hope that will come over. So there will be, I hope, some wit for those who like that sort of thing.
Do you think there'll be comparisons between From Here to Eternity and South Pacific?
Well, there might be. It didn't, stupidly, it should have done. It didn't cross my mind but, until, I suppose, I was 3 years in with Stuart, that this is not the first musical written about GIs in the Pacific. But there again, most musicals, you could find some parallel. Lion King is not the first musical to feature felines.
Based on Hamlet.
Based on Hamlet, yes. So there's always something, but that's fine.
But what I find particularly interesting about this is that the novel, as far as I've got, seems to be very seriously about relationships in the military.
Yeah.
So in a way, South Pacific has that as a background, but to some extent that there are other issues in South Pacific which go beyond the military life. Here you're dealing with military life, and even in the film, that there are so many images of soldiers marching, soldiers on parade, the discipline, and the relationships among the soldiers. Did you find was that a particular chapter? Because I don't know any musical that really deals on that degree of depth and detail with the relationships within a military kind of environment, including for example, the wife. I mean, she's a military wife,
Yes.
isn't she? Really.
Yes.
So it's all very much set in that.
Yes, every. I mean, it's in its heart. It's about two love affairs against this backdrop of impending war and a very enclosed society, which makes relationships between the men, as you've pointed out, very crucial. And it's about relationships between guy and guy, not necessarily sexual, although there's a bit of that as well. But also it's about these two love affairs, both of which are kind of forbidden love affairs. One of them involves the sergeant having an affair with his superior's wife, which obviously would lead him into serious trouble if he was caught, and indeed her. And the other is between a loner private, a loner GI, who's really rebelling against almost everything, and a hooker in the club, and she should not be getting involved with her clients. And she's really quite a respectable girl at heart, and she wants to get back to Oregon. She's making a stack of money, enough to choke a steer, as she says at one point. And like many girls in the war, or just before the war, they came over from Oregon and California, and they went over to Hawaii, and they worked in clubs as, frankly, hookers. But as far as their families back home were concerned, they were working in, they were PAs or secretaries to distinguished businessmen in the sugar business in Hawaii, and they would do this for a couple of years, and then come back with a load of money and be very respectable and marry the right person. And so the relationships, these two principal love affairs, are almost doomed from the start. But you feel a lot of hope, and they obviously are genuine passion. The passion and the love is heightened by the appallingly difficult circumstances in which they find themselves. Not just the fact that their love affairs are very dodgy, but the fact that any minute now the war could start. I mean, the war has started in Europe. It's already a world war, but America hasn't come in. And of course, as we all now know, on December the 7th, 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, and America was instantly drawn into the war. They probably would have come in anyway.
And this story is just before that. Is that
this is just before that? So it starts, I'm not sure of the exact date, but I would say it starts like July 1941. And of course, our characters don't know that Pearl Harbor's around the corner, but they do know that war is around the corner. There's plenty of references to, this ain't a war, but it's gonna be, and so historically and emotionally, it's an extremely high, high maintenance time.
And also it works well for today's audiences because of the whole military wives phenomenon. And
I suppose that's true. Again,
lots of people have lost husbands.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, of course, when we started working on this, or when Stuart and I began working on it, that aspect of our current involvement in the military wasn't so heightened. We weren't so aware of it. So that's something that's happened, which
I wouldn't put it on the posters, though.
No, we're not trying to. I mean, this isn't something that we're trying to cash in on remotely. I mean,
but on the other hand, people are interested,
but
I
if
think,
people
and aware of this.
Yeah, I think it has a certain relevance. Yes,
and we're less inclined, I think, to see military life sentimentally today, aren't we? I mean, we're
possibly, yes. I mean, yes, I think that's true. It's a hard, brutal life, and as we've seen with our military today, people's lives are profoundly affected. People at home just as much as people out there, and lives get lost, and it's awful.
It strikes me, just looking at the story from the outside, as I say, just having dipped into the novel, that there are two things that seem obvious to musicalise, and one is that one of the central characters is a bugler. And there's some competition about the bugling, and then the other thing is boxing, which I thought might make for interesting dance. Well, I don't know whether that features at all in the show. But did the bugling appeal to you in terms of musicalising it?
In a way, the bugling is interesting because the fact is, I mean, the interesting part is that he won't play the bugle. One of the problems Pruitt, who is the loner, if you like, the James Deany type GI, is that he won't box. He's a brilliant boxer and he's a brilliant bugler, and he won't box because he had when he was with a previous company in a different part of the US Army, he blinded somebody accidentally, and now he won't box, and he's been transferred to this new company, and the commander of the company is very excited about his arrival because he's such a good boxer, and he says, "Great, now Pruitt, you're going to box for us and we're going to win the championship." He seems more concerned about winning the boxing championship between the different regiments than he is about the war. And he is also the husband of the lady who becomes involved with one of the sergeants. And the sergeant has a relationship with Pruitt, not sexual, but they become very much involved, their lives become intertwined. And Pruitt won't box, and this gets Pruitt into severe trouble, and he's very badly treated by his own commander and his own superiors, hoping to break him, hoping to make him box. Neither will he play the bugle. He was a brilliant bugler, but he says, for personal reasons, I'm just not doing that, because, and the reason is we find that he was passed over by his previous commander because there's an implication that the man who was given the bugling honours was in some sort of relationship with his commander. So he's got a lot of issues. He comes to this new regiment frankly pissed off with almost every aspect of his life. And he came into the army because he was pissed off with his life in the first place. So he's got a few problems.
But I presume you can then have that wonderful moment when he does either box or start playing.
Well, you'll have to wait and see. There is certainly that is something that you think, is he ever going to?
There's nothing more boring than having someone have a talent at the beginning of a show. You want it to lead up to that moment dramatically.
Well, you're absolutely right, but I wouldn't dream of giving away too much. But you can always read the book.
I wonder. I mean, some people listening to this might wonder why it had been thought to make a musical of it, because it sounds like it is a wonderfully dramatic story. And I'm not saying that musicals shouldn't be dramatic. Of course, they always have been. And go back to West Side Story and beyond. But did you find it? I mean, did you and the team find it easy to find places for songs? Or
yeah, I think we did. I mean, I've always maintained that musicals
far too long.
I maintain they're far too long. Yes, that's another point. I mean, musicals, opera, most of the great ones are based on something that's been in existence in another form. My Fair Lady, West Side Story, Lion King. I mean, all these things are basically a retelling in a new way, and music brings a power and an interest and an emotion. I'm only talking about the music here, not the lyrics, which other forms can't bring. Doesn't mean to say it will be better. Doesn't mean to say that My Fair Lady is better than Pygmalion the play. They're both brilliant, but they're different, and My Fair Lady adds things to the play, which and maybe takes some things away.
Like the ending.
Yes, like the ending. Stop ruining my argument. But basically, I mean, the story of Eva Peron, everybody said, well, why would you do that as a musical? Well, I think with the story of Evita, it's actually because she was, in a way, a theatrical being herself, who happened to be playing it up primarily on the political stage. I think a musical was almost the best way to tell the story of Eva Peron. And look at Les Mis as a wonderful book by Victor Hugo. No one's saying that Les Miserables has replaced Hugo's book, but it's brought a lot of people to the book. It's told the story in a way that a lot of people, get things out of it that they might not have done.
Roald Dahl's having a huge
yeah, absolutely, Roald Dahl. I mean, it comes back to the thing I always bang on about, is that it's a great story, and there's a lot in this story which I think we can bring out. It's there. I mean, I'm not. I mean, James Jones is the key genius of this project, and I can only say that his daughter Kaylee, who is a novelist in her own right, very nice lady, she's been very supportive of the project once she heard it, and she's told us on more than one occasion when we did some workshops, my father would have really been happy with this, and that's the best compliment we can get. I mean, she might be wrong, but I don't think she is.
Well, yes.
And we have shown enormous, I hope, respect for the brilliant book that James Jones wrote. And if we bring James Jones's work to a few more people, and if we bring out things that people might not have got in it before out of the story. And if we do, I mean, just as the writers of Les Mis did that for Victor Hugo, I mean, that's great. But we're doing it because it's a great story.
Yes, I was very impressed to read about her, particularly his daughter, Kate Cayley, and about the way in which she has more recently insisted that when the book is reprinted, as it has been, that it should be unexpurgated. And it seems interesting that, again, that I can imagine some of the material must have been more critical of the military to begin with than would have been, in a way, possible or allowable in the early 1950s when the novel was first published, but also that she's allowed some of the homosexual implications which were there, and the swearing, and so the realism of the novel, which seems very impressive for its time, particularly, is back there because of her determination to have it published as was.
No, she's a wonderful torchbearer for her father's great work, and of course he wrote several other fine books as well.
He was about 23 or something when he wrote the book, wasn't he?
I should know this. I don't think he was that young. No, he can't have been that young because he was in Hawaii in the war, so he probably would have been 23 in 1941. So I guess he would have been 33 when he wrote the book. I think I must check this up. I'm very glad about this interview. So I was making sure I know exactly when James Jones was born.
The fact that you have access now to the complete novel, does that figure at all? I mean, in other words, are you able to use some of the material that would have been expurgated?
Yes, I mean, it I think more than actual plot details, because the unexpurgated version doesn't reveal too much more about the storyline. But I think it tells you a bit more about some of the characters, and we feel we're able to be more, truthful and blunt, really, at times. I mean, I don't want this to be like Book of Mormon, where every other word is rude. It's not, but it's a grown-up show,
it's
and
honest.
I hope so, and it tries to, apart from telling a great story, and apart from, dealing with too important or too passionate love affairs, I hope it also illustrates a bit, as much as you can in musical theatre, what it was like being in the army. I mean, we won't have a lot of glossy sets. We'll have some great sets. But
sets, listeners.
But there's the, I mean, from a theatrical point of view, one of the things that also appeals to me about this story is that we've got contrast of the stark barracks and the rather glamour of Hawaii, including the slightly tacky glamour, but it's still glamour of the club. The brothels and the bars. So there's a lot of variety there, and just as the men escape on Friday nights into the flesh pots of Honolulu, so the show will at times escape from the, bareness and the brutality of the barracks into the glamour and the excitement of nightlife in downtown Honolulu.
It does sound fascinating.
Say that again.
Well, I'm certainly interested, and I mean, just thinking about this and reading about the musical had encouraged me to go back to the book, and I'm finding it a fascinating read.
It's a great book.
Genuinely.
It's a long book. I mean,
Yes.
It's 900 odd pages, depending on which version you buy. But I was amazed how good the book was. That sounds a bit patronising, but I'd seen the film, and when Stuart came to me, obviously I knew the story because of the film. And I re-looked at the film and said, yeah, this is a great story. I mean, even I was too young to remember the film when it came out. But it's so often shown on TV.
Yes.
I always say to people, our show is not based on the film. The film is based on the book. We're based on the book. However, if you want to have a quick grasp of the storyline, the basic plot, have a look at the movie.
I wonder if we can shift our discussion just a little bit to something that really has fascinated me about your own career, but I think it relates to this project as well, which is you've been someone who's been, let's say, adventurous. You may have other words for it, in terms of the way that you've worked with different people. I mean, you have worked, obviously, a number of times with Andrew Lloyd Webber, but you've also worked with Elton John a few times, you've worked with Alan Menken a few times, and doubtless there may be others. But actually, you have worked with the ABBA boys, but you have worked with a large number of composers, and that's not typical. I mean, I think perhaps most of the Broadway, traditional Broadway composers have always worked as teams, And I wonder if that's something that you've really enjoyed, and now you're working with a completely new team.
Yeah.
It seems to me, and it does seem to me that is an adventurous thing for a lyricist to do, because you could get lost. One could feel, well, I'm a bit lost. I'm the lyricist, and they're controlling me. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that you've got to the stage where you demand the rights of the auteur, or are you happy to adapt to other people's vision? How does it work for you?
Well, I'm quite happy to adapt to people. I mean, I regard Stuart, as far as the writing is concerned, it's a 50-50 split. I don't think there's any reason why I should get more, or because, I've got a track record. Obviously, I'm producing it as well, so I've had to put a huge amount of time and a fair amount of money into this project, although I'm glad to say that we've got all the investment we need, so with luck, I won't lose any money on this in the end. I may not make any, but I won't lose any. But the thing is, it's interesting. I have written with a lot of different composers, but and you say that's not usual, but there again, there aren't that many other lyricists around. There's Don Black, and after that, you think, I'm not quite sure who else is there doing it time and time again. No one else is insane enough to do it time and time again.
Richard still goes.
Richard, I think, is a brilliant comedy writer, but he's not really written that many shows. I mean, he's got wonderful careers, not least in charitable works, and I'm an enormous fan of Richard.
It's a shame we haven't heard more from Charles Hart.
Well, Charles Hart is a very distinguished lyricist as well. He's also a great composer, and I think he might have been almost slightly distracted by the mega success of Phantom, and I think it's I would say that his contribution to Phantom has been grossly underestimated and grossly underappreciated, in my humble opinion. But I digress. I'm not quite sure what I'm digressing from. Yes. I mean, initially, I would have, if you'd asked me this question, or if somebody had said in 1978, what's going to happen with your career? I would say, well, Andrew and I will carry on writing until, the public tell us to get stuffed. But then, of course, he wanted to do Cats, and that didn't need any lyrics. And then I think he wanted to do Starlight, which wasn't something that particularly interested me. And by then, I was working. I thought, well, while he's doing Cats, I better do something else. I don't know why I thought that, but I did. And I worked on I wanted to do this children's show, Blondel, which didn't really work. Although it is actually being reworked at the moment. I don't know whether it will ever achieve anything. And then I got this idea for Chess, which Andrew wasn't that interested in, and I took it to Bjorn and Benny because I heard by chance they were looking to move into theatre. And then once that had happened, even though Chess wasn't initially a mega success like Phantom, and Andrew then, of course, went into the stratosphere with Cats and Phantom, it was kind of over for us. And I thought, well, that's a pity. We discussed at various points coming back together, but there was nothing really that worked. And I thought, I'm going to get sucked into some sort of machine here. And, with Phantom, I mean, Andrew approached me about Phantom, but then it was clear he only wanted me to do some lyrics. And I thought, no. And also I was, again, these are great ideas because they've been huge successes, but they weren't ideas that really appealed to me. And I could afford not to do things unless I really wanted to. And I wanted to do Chess, and it had a few ups and downs, but it's still going strong. It's still one of the most performed musicals around. And I'm very glad I did that. And then I went to Disney, and I suddenly found myself working with Alan Menken, who's brilliant, one of the greatest Broadway composers of his time. Elton John, who's one of the greatest pop music. And suddenly I found I was involved in the biggest animated film ever. I was involved in one of the biggest Broadway shows ever. I thought, actually, it's gone rather well.
do you find it? Well, I mean, it sounds way
probably gone better than it would have done with me and Andrew sticking together.
It's rather stimulating for you.
Yes.
You work with people with a different musical attitude.
No, and working with Elton, of course, was different because he liked the words first. Yeah. And working in movies was different. I mean, I was very fortunate to get into movie musicals. All right, they were animated, but they were good. And I think
they've subsequently become stage.
Yes, I didn't expect that. So I've been very lucky. It's turned out working with different composers. I think in retrospect, if Andrew and I had stuck together, I don't think we would have, either of us, done quite as well as we have separately. I mean, I may be wrong, but I don't think I could have done much better.
Well, it's difficult not to get into a formula when you are a partnership like that.
And I'm not sure that, I think our tastes in musical theatre, Andrew was probably more traditional than me, which is fine, because that works. I mean, Phantom could not have been, that's a huge success. But I think going down the road I've had the great fun of working with indisputably brilliant composers like Bjorn and Benny and Alan and Elton. And I was, if I were ever to brag about something, which of course is totally alien to my nature, I would say that the thing that satisfied me most was, and winning prizes is doesn't mean too much, but the fact that I won 3 Oscars with 3 different composers is something that I'm quite proud of, because I think, well, what do these Oscar wins have in common? And I think, might be me.
Well, it's a discipline, isn't it? Because the lyricist has to be very disciplined. Among all the people working on a musical, isn't it the lyricist who, and almost writing the lyrics is the most, it's the aspect which requires the most discipline.
Well, it requires the most time, that's for sure.
Because you can have a tune, but you still want to do 5 sets of lyrics to it.
You precisely, and sometimes, quite rightly, not a criticism, in a show like Evita, you're not only writing 6 verses or 6 stanzas of Don't Cry For Me Argentina, you're writing 6 to Oh What a Circus, which is in essence the same tune, and Santa Evita. It's quite right that in an opera, themes should come back musically, and they're vitally important, and on their own the lyrics would do nothing. But it takes a long time to write.
And then you get stuck into a wonderful rhyme pattern. You think, oh shit, I've got to do it again 6 times.
One good thing about working with Elton is that if I don't like the rhyme pattern, because there's no tune at that point, I can change the rhyme pattern. And I say, do I really need a quadruple rhyme?
One of the I think, in my personal opinion, the greatest, if not quite the most successful artistically, but it seems to me the greatest musical of the 80s that should have been the greatest success, and I think you yourself have talked about it not being quite perfect because of the book, is Chess. I really think it's possibly the most ambitious and certainly to me the most interesting of the British musicals of the 80s. And I wonder, I know you've worked on it a lot and you've got a particular fondness for it, I'd say quite rightly. Is there, I've heard you say, I think it was after or just before the concert version at the Royal Albert Hall, which was a great success in itself. But you said, I think, that the Swedish version, as produced, it was for you was the most successful integration of all the elements. Is that? I mean, do you still feel that?
No, not the Swedish one. The Swedish one was very good. It was a huge hit commercially. I mean, anything Bjorn and Benny do is going to be a mega hit in Sweden. No, the plot in Sweden was changed fairly drastically. I mean, a couple of new songs were put in. And it was all in Swedish, so there were a couple of songs which I really had nothing to do with, although I did write English lyrics for them. But that version didn't really work because it was only set in one place. It was all in Murano, and the whole thing was squashed into 5 days, which meant that Florence and Anatoly had an affair and then split up within 3 or 4 days. So their what should have been a long, life-changing affair became little more than a one-night stand. No, I think the problem with Chess is the perceived. I mean, firstly, song-wise, it's been as big as anything I've done. I mean, the songs just are always being recorded. You still hear them on the radio. They were very successful.
I know them so well.
Yeah, yes, right. And that's been very satisfying. And I think the music is the score is outstanding. And the perceived wisdom of Chess is that it's great, but the book is too confusing. Well, the book is confusing, but the reason it's confusing is largely because you can't hear the words. And what was interesting for me was that when we did it at the Albert Hall, and I insisted on, I wanted the whole thing to be subtitled or surtitled. I wanted all the lyrics up on a screen so people could understand what was going on, because you get great chunks of that score, great scenes with wonderful music, but you can't really hear what they're saying. And so in the end, the audience kind of gives up on the story and says, well, there's another good song coming along in 2 or 3 minutes, so I'll enjoy that. And indeed they do. We've got the anthem, or I Know Him So Well, or Heaven Help My Heart, or Pity the Child, or all these songs, One Night in Bangkok. They're great. And they keep you going. But the bits in between often are bewildering, and it's because you can't hear the words. When we did Murano, I mean, I remember Cameron McIntosh saying, well, you've got to get rid of that Tyrolean stuff. What's all that about? Dear, yes. And Cameron basically thought the score was terrific, but he didn't get, and how could he, what Murano was about. When we stuck the words to Murano up on the screen at the Albert Hall, and I wish we'd done it with the whole show, the audience laughed, loved it, and it got a huge round. It never got that before, because all it looked like before was a load of blokes singing a rather vague Tyrolean tune.
And that's the kind of thing with opera, isn't it? You just you can't understand what's being said.
So
you
have
might be lucky to have, but you know a good tune's going to come along.
And there's another piece in Chess, which is a wonderful piece of writing by Benny Anderson, of all the great, and he's set to music, all the winners of the chess championship since time began. So you've got all these wonderful names and their dates as well. in the show. And when it happens on stage, people come on and they hear 2 or 3 minutes of great music, but they could be singing the Swahili phone directory for all they know. It's all Swedish, yes, exactly. Could be the Stockholm Railway timetable. They don't know what it's about. But on that in the Albert Hall, we put the names of these chess players up there, and it became a very moving piece, because you suddenly realised that all these people in their day were the champions of the world. They were the best in the world, and now it doesn't matter anything. Yeah. They're dead. It's over, and suddenly you think it was rather chilling, and it made a very powerful point, which had been completely missed in every production of chess up to that point.
You've explained very clearly to me why. I mean, I actually saw the original production at the Prince Edward.
Well, see, that was a problem. I mean, just sorry to interrupt you, but we, and I'm to blame, but there were no surtitles. We initially began the show with Murano, which nobody understood a word of that. But so we decided to put in before that the story of chess. So there was a ballet, then there was a story of chess, but because that's choral, nobody understood that. So 8 minutes in, and then you get Murano, and nobody understood that.
Good start.
12 minutes in, and people have been thinking, well, what's going on? Then you get Reporters, which is a choral thing and wasn't particularly interesting musically. It was a kind of plot thing, but they didn't hear most of that. Not until Anatoly, about 20 minutes in, sings Where I Want to Be, which is a good song. Did the audience have a clue what was happening? So we were struggling to get them back.
Yes, I remember it. I still have this image, remembering it looking beautiful, but not having understood very clearly what the point was. And when I saw it at the Albert Hall, I thought, suddenly I got it. I got the whole thing.
It still wasn't as clear as I'd liked it to be. I mean, there's a great, very important song called "It's the US versus USSR." I mean, it's a song in which it's the Cold War song, and of course, most people these days, young people don't really understand or remember what it was like in the Cold War. And really, we should almost start with that song now, but we should have the lyrics up so people can understand what's going on.
Do you think with the success of Les Mis as a film, do you think a film of chess would be
the
next step?
I've kind of thought, I mean, we're always getting offers to do chess. It's always being staged, and we've had Broadway talks about it again, because the Broadway show was a disaster. And if somebody came up to me and said, right, we're going to do this brilliant Broadway show, we've got the world's greatest director, we've got some stars, blah, 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 fine. I'm not going to say, no, you can't. But I think it could work. I mean, if I have an ambition left, apart from swimming the channel, which I don't think I'm going to do now, it would be a film of chess. I think it could really work. And we've been talking about that for 20 years. And I think you could then hear every word. You could put in a bit of dialogue to make the story clearer.
You can have text, you can mix it properly.
Yes, exactly. And you could get over the feeling, which people don't remember now. I mean, I'm older than you guys, but you've got to be really 40 to have an adult appreciation of what it was like living in the Cold War. Yeah. And it was very interesting. I mean, people didn't wander around in this country worrying all the time, but it was kind of taken as a given that. Can you say that? Taken as a given? It's an interesting phrase.
Yes. Taken as given, yes. It's a great song.
It was assumed that if there was going to be a war, well, it was assumed that there could be a war, and if it was going to be against Russia, and we could all be wiped out.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, that can still happen, but our worries now take on. I think, frankly, it's much more worrying. I was never that worried personally about the Cold War. I thought, well, it might happen, but if it does, I ain't going to know about it. But it's much more worrying now, I think, when you've got much more localised disasters and tragedies and terrorism, this sort of thing. But to get over to people what the Cold War was like needs to be done in any version of chess now.
Well, someday we might get the film, which would be great. But we might even get the film, a film of the From Here to Eternity musical. Wouldn't that be?
It's
full
not impossible.
Cycle?
I mean, the producers did that, didn't they?
Yes.
I mean, and I'm sure plenty of other examples. I mean, of course there are. I mean, South Pacific. I've forgotten what that was based on, but it was based on a book.
James Michener, I think.
Was it James Michener? And Oklahoma's based on Consider the Lilies, was it called?
Green Grow the Lilacs.
Oh, Green Grow the Lilacs, sorry.
I think Consider the Lilies would have been more saleable, wouldn't it?
I do want to say, Tim, I've just come back from LA where I saw the 45-minute production of Aladdin playing.
Oh, what's that like?
It's wonderful. Disney built this 2,500 seat theatre for this 45.
But that's coming to Broadway.
And it's going to Broadway. So it's kind of weird. It's gone from film to theme park show and back to Broadway.
Well,
whilst doing Seattle.
I've only got 2 songs in that one. Because I came in at the last minute.
There's more composers than most shows have producers.
Yes, I mean, but they can't boot out Whole New World. So I'm quite looking forward to seeing that on Broadway. I think it's opening on Broadway or Toronto this winter.
2014, it's going to the Lump Fontaine. Or
is it really?
I think
Gosh,
so.
you know more than me.
And it's amazing in California, and during A Whole New World, the carpet does fly over the whole auditorium, and these kids' faces are just...
Oh, fantastic.
Godsmacked. I've got a photo which I'll show you. But Tim, thank you very much for talking to us.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for your interest in the new stuff as well as the old stuff.
Sir Tim Rice there. For more information on From Here to Eternity, the musical, you can visit www.fromheretoeternitythemusical.com. For more information on Musical Talk, please visit musicaltalk.co.uk or follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/musicaltalk. We're going to end this episode with a clip from Michael Ball's new album, Both Sides Now, which features a song written by Stuart Brayson and Tim Rice from Here to Eternity called Fight the Fight.
And maybe there's somebody there, but all along knowing that no one has reason to care. Fighting the fight, stating my case, singing my song. An army around me I'm part of, but I don't belong. Nobody knows what's gone wrong. A man's on his own, whatever illusion applies. Man's on his own till he dies. A man's on his own, whatever illusion applies. Man's on his own till he dies.
This episode was presented and edited by Nick Hutson with Robert Gordon. Copyright Musical Talk 2013.